Okay, we are going to cover some latex cuts, wounds, and scars. First thing we are going to do is a cut. And right now I'm using an eye pencil to draw out the shape of the cut. This lets me know where to put the tissue that I'm going to embed in latex. So that's where I want to put it. It's going to be like a gaping cheap cut. Now I just want some nice toilet paper. Any toilet paper will do. You don't have to use Charmin like me. And I'm going to tear off a strip that's about the length of the cut that I want. So I want it like that. And then I'm going to tear off like 1/2-inch strips. And I'm going to need 6 of these because I'm going to do 3 layers. But only 1 layer is going to be that long. My second layer is going to be a bit shorter. And you'll see how all this goes in a bit. So I want to make sure that's shorter. So I'm going to tear those off. So basically I'm going to do 3 layers, and each layer wants to be smaller than the next. And then what that's going to do is it's going to give me kind of a nice even gradient of a sort of the lips of a wound. So I've got 4 there and 5. And toilet paper sticks to your hands. Okay, there's my 6 pieces. And now I want to tear off all the little edges because I want really like irregular edges because that's going to blend out better. So anything that's a straight edge, I'm going to tear off so that they're all kind of nice amoeba shapes for me to embed in the latex. And latex as a medium is really just about figuring out what you can kind of stick in it to make it do what you want. Here I'm holding this up to my face and testing it. Now I'm going to fold it in half, but not quite in half. One edge is going to be longer than the other, and that's going to give me a nice slope, a nice gradient slope. And I've got it a bit too long, so I'm tearing it off. And I'm also shaping it. I'm going to give it a little S curve here so that it will fit around the cut. Fit around, too long. So I'm going to figure out kind of where I want to tear that off. Okay, too long. Take that off. Happy with that shape. Check it one more time. And go for the latex. Your latex comes in a little bottle with a brush in it. I just have this sort of random bottle that someone gave me. This is cosmetic grade latex. You do not want to use any other grade. The ammonia content is too high. So I'm using a Q-tip to apply mine. You'll have a brush. You can use a Q-tip if your brush gets nasty. And the Q-tips are kind of nice because you can just, if they start to, the cotton starts to fall off, you can just throw them away or use the other side. So they're a nice like disposable thing. Latex essentially ruins anything it touches. You can't get it off. So I'm laying a base layer of latex down, and then I'm going to stick my tissue kind of on top of that with the folded edge towards the center of the cut. That folded edge of the tissue is going to be my my wound. So I've torn a like amoeba shape piece of tissue. I've folded it in half and shaped it to fit the cut. And in that place where it's folded in half is where the opening of the cut is. And then I take latex and I embed the tissue in latex. So it's sitting on a bed of latex, and then I push the latex into the top. And I'm being really gentle here. I don't want to wipe back and forth. I want to be really careful because latex gets nubby really quick. And right now I'm using a metal spoon. Anything stainless steel will help to kind of smooth it out because latex, when you just paint it on, gets really bumpy and nubby. All right, so I'm happy with that. Here's my second piece, and I'm folding it. Again, one edge is longer than the other, so I get a nice tapered edge. And I'm checking it to my face, making sure it's the right length. And I've shaped it a little bit, and making sure, and I'm putting my latex down. Little latex bed for my tissue to sit in. And now I'm putting my latex on its little latex bed. And this is the first layer of 3 that we're going to do. And each layer is going to be a little bit smaller. But you can see already how that kind of makes a cut shape on your face. When you're dealing with prosthetics, you can't cut away your skin because that's sort of frowned upon. You have to sort of build your skin up so it looks like it's cut away. And be careful with what I'm doing here. I'm using latex really close to my eye, and it's not going to hurt you near your eye, but the ammonia evaporates. The ammonia in latex evaporates, and it kind of makes your eyes water if it gets too close to your eye. So that's why I'm kind of making a face with my eyes there. And I'm making sure it doesn't get in my eye. And I'm using my spoon to smooth it. Stainless steel doesn't stick very much to the latex, so it makes a wonderful smoothing thing. The heat of your skin starts to cure latex very quickly, so you want to work with something cool. That's why your fingers aren't great to work with latex, because they'll make it cure too quickly. All right, happy with that, layer 1. Now I'm going to do something like a burn scar. So I'm going to take all those little bits of tissue that I tore off from the cut, and I'm going to tear a couple more in case I need some. So I'm going to do like a hot oil spatter type burn scar. This might be useful for pirate, or perhaps somebody in your car crash got some sort of horrific burn. You can use it as you like. You can make it a fresh wound. I'm doing it as a scar, but you can make it a fresh wound by just having more color on it when we do the painting part. So just like anything, just like the other cut anyway, I'm laying down a bed of latex where I'm going to put my little burn scar. And I don't actually recommend doing it in such a circular shape, but this is just a demo for how you do that. And then I'm going to take those little bits of tissue and I'm going to stick them on my face. Little tissue face. You can make these in shapes or anything, any way you want. You could make them more stringy, like cutting long ones. Sometimes burns look stringy. The skin has a really wonderful way of knitting itself back together when it's burnt, creating all kinds of wonderful bumps and lumps. All right, so now I've got my tissue stuck to my face, and now I'm dabbing the latex. And notice how I'm not dragging that Q-tip around. If I were to wipe back and forth with it, that would move all those little pieces of tissue around. So you have to really be kind of careful until they're embedded. And if something gets stuck, twisting like I just did with that Q-tip is a way to kind of get it off the brush and help it stick to your face. And blendable edges are really important. You notice anything I do, I'm feathering the edges out so that they go really neatly into my skin. Any kind of thickness is going to make a little bump and an edge that's not so blendable. And that is not what we want. And a little more latex in our burn. Make sure that's all good and embedded. I decided I wanted some more stuff in my burn, so I added some more. And that's a layer 1 of my burn scar. And I'm adding one more piece of tissue for good measure. So it's a nice blobby burn scar. Right now it looks like a big white streak on my face. Now this is clear latex that I'm using. Yours might have a flesh tint to it. If you don't have a flesh tint latex and you want it to be flesh tint, you can just add some foundation or acrylic paint to it. All right, now I'm gonna make a keloid scar, which is a type of hypertrophic scar. Hypertrophic meaning it's raised from the skin. And the way that I'm gonna do that is I'm gonna make my latex thick. And I've got a little stainless steel cup there of flour. So I'm gonna pour some latex into a mixing pot. And I want about twice as much latex as flour. Add the flour carefully. The flour is gonna pull the moisture right out of the latex and cause it to dry very quickly. So you don't have a lot of working time with this, but it does make the latex kind of like a paste. So you can build up dimension with just the latex as opposed to having to embed something in it. And I'm using the back of a paintbrush and I'm kind of stabbing it to break up the lumps of flour so that I get as neat a paste as I can possibly get. And I just want to mix this up until it's all thoroughly mixed. It'll be a little bit lumpy, but as good as you can get it. If you work for it too long, it'll start to dry. And then you won't be able to put it on your face. So you can see now it's getting nice and bumpy and lumpy. And I'm kind of gathering it up. I'm scraping it off right now, but I'm going to gather it up on the end of that brush. And I'm going to kind of roll the brush like I'm doing here on my forehead to sort of roll this stuff off. Here you go. I've got the brush with the shmoo. And I'm just going to twist the brush and roll along my forehead. And all that lovely flowery latex is going to goop off on my head. Keloid scars are, like I said, they're raised scars. When the cut or whatever the wound is heals, the body produces an excess of tissue and you get like a little raised scar. They're a type of hypertrophic scar. So that's any kind of raised scar. Atrophic scars are ones that are like sunk into your skin. And it just depends on what your body does when it's healing, whether it does that. And I'm using my metal spoon to smooth this out a little bit because I don't want it to be like too much of a lump on my head. But you'll see when this dries that all that width of the scar there, you won't really see that. You want to be careful with what I'm doing here. It appears that I have latex stuck on the end of the spoon, and you don't want to do that because the latex will stick to other latex. All right, now it's time for layer 2 on my cut. So I'm picking up those things, those little pieces of tissue that I pre-ripped, folding them in half, and just kind of seeing what if I need to shape them or make them shorter. Doing what I need to do to make that work. And anytime you do this, you've got to sort of give yourself a little bed for the latex to lay on. So there's my little latex bed. And you want to draw the latex bed bigger than you need, but not huge because the latex will end up taking up your whole face. It may seem like this cut's really big, but in all actuality, it's only about 1.5 inches. So when you're planning these cuts, you want to keep that in mind because your face is smaller than you think. So you don't want to have huge cuts on your face that don't fit. And you want to be really careful when you're embedding this in the latex. There's that ammonia getting in my eye. You don't want the tissue to wrinkle. So that's why I'm being really careful with the way that I'm pulling it. That I'm not going back and forth, and if it starts to pull in one direction, I kind of back off and work at it from another angle so it lays down as smoothly as I can get it to lay down. It has a tendency to want to wrinkle. I'm pulling the lips of the cut open here a little bit. I think with this layer, I overlap the initial one so that I get this kind of open gash with like the skin overhanging the wound. Nice and gross. Happy with that, and now I'm going to do the other side. Shaping it into an S curve. The tissue is really forgiving, so you can kind of bend it into all kinds of wonderful shapes. But that folded edge gives you like a double raised edge, so you get a lot of bang for your buck with this method. There are any number of ways to do latex cuts, by the way. You look on the internet, and lots of people are going to tell you lots of ways. This is just one way. I like this way because especially cuts on your cheek tend to sort of flare open. This is a way to get a nice like edgy lip of your cut. There are a lot of ways that people do them where they cut the latex open directly on their face, and I didn't think it was a great idea for you guys to take a pair of scissors to your face. Also, latex is very hard to cut, so you have to work really hard to cut it while it's on your face. I'm going to show you a method of making a latex cut, not on your face, on a piece of plastic, and then you can remove it and put it on your face as a latex appliance. So we are smoothing out layer 2. finger to smooth it out. Tends to make nubbies and bumpies. I'm using my finger here to push open the lips of the cut. Alright, now my burn that I applied is nice and dry, but I'm going to apply another layer of latex over it just to smooth it out a little bit. You can see all those little nubby bits of tissue I shoved in there. They're maybe a little too nubby, so you can apply layers of latex over things to kind of smooth them out a little bit. You want to make sure you don't work them too much and that the latex can sit nicely on your face. Okay, now I'm going to attempt to make a hypertrophic scar. I'm sorry, an atrophic scar on my face, one that's sunk. But in order to do that, I have to kind of build my head up first. So what I'm making is two little tissue cigars here. Here's one. Really skinny. This is a really, really thin thing. It's probably less than 1/16 of an inch wide by the time I roll it up. And I'm ripping off about 1/2 inch of tissue and rolling it up like that. Making sure the ends are like tapered and everything. Get it nice and twisted, nice and tapered, and this one broke, and that's okay. I just decided to make my scar a little smaller. If I wanted to, I could just pick up another piece of tissue. It's not like tissue paper. It's not like toilet paper is in short supply at the moment. Anyway, there's my cigars, and I'm going to put a little layer of latex on my face so that I've got something to stick my cigars into. Boom. Stick the cigar on your face. And this is going to be a relatively straight scar. And the other one, just the other side of it. So you want them to have a little bit of space between them, but not too much. The idea is that the skin has already knitted itself back together really well. And now I need to embed the whole thing in latex. One of the dangers of the cigar method, you can use this method for cuts as well, is that the edge of the cut isn't really, is kind of a little too raised. But I'm going to do a second layer with tissue here and show you how I kind of handle that with this. So I embed those little cigars and I'm happy with that. Make sure the split is how I want it to be, that they're far enough apart. All right, now this is ready for its third layer. That's nice and easy. We've done 2 of those. We just do the third one. This ends up a little bumpy too. You can do a 4th layer without any tissue, just kind of like you did on the burn. Just go over it and let the latex kind of fill in the holes. And that's my 3rd layer done. Now I'm going to put some goo in the middle of the cut. When you get a cut that's that open, you get little nubs and bumps of fat and tissue that kind of show through. So I'm going to embed some tissue inside the cut to make some texture inside the cut that looks like skin. Not skin, that looks like what skin looks like when you cut it open. That sucked my finger there a little bit, which is something that can happen. You don't need to put very much in. You don't want to eclipse the cut. This just gives you something to highlight inside the cut. And you'll see when we paint kind of how that helps. And I'm pulling the edges of the cut out here, so I've got a nice flared open cut. You can do that. Latex is pretty stretchy and bendable, especially while it's wet. You can kind of mold it a little bit. And this isn't very wet, but it's a tiny bit wet. Now the scar on my forehead, that atrophic scar, I'm going to take some tissue and I'm going to tear tissue the size to cover both cigars, and then some. So I'm kind of making like a little blanket for that scar. And that's the size I want right there, like that. And we've learned that we have to embed everything in latex, so I'm applying some latex. Try to get it inside the wound and all around. Love the smell of latex. Sorry about the terrible lighting. I didn't have time to set up a perfect studio. So I set that on top of the cut and I embed that in latex now too. So latex, tissue, latex. And this is covering both of those cigars. And what it's hoping to do is make a nice kind of gentle slope up to the opening. And then the actual opening will look sunken like an atrophic scar. I'm not super thrilled with how this turned out, by the way. This was actually my third attempt at doing this on your skin. When you work with latex on your skin, it dries quicker than I'd like it to. And that specifically with this type of scar, it's very difficult. There's a product called rigid collodion you can use that really does atrophic scars well. Anyway, now all of my latex has dried and I need to powder it. Powder is going to help the latex take makeup a little bit better. And it's also very sticky when it's not powdered. So this is going to make it a little more like skin and blend in with your skin really well. So I am powdering. I'm using a small brush to apply the powder because there's lots of little nooks and crannies in these things, and the small brush allows me to kind of push it in there. I'm going to clean it all off in a bit with a big kabuki type brush. But it's important to get the powder everywhere, so that's why I'm using a small brush with it. And there's my kabuki brush, and all the white is not undried latex, it's tissue. So I'm going to use my foundation, and I like to use brushes. It's actually important to use brush on latex because otherwise if you use a sponge, it won't push it into the little nubs and bumps. It'll kind of dry brush the foundation on, and that's not what you want. So I use a brush to help push it in. And foundation. You can see how much I'm having to work to get it into all the little nooks and crannies. You don't really have to put it inside the cut, but you can. I swear this foundation is the right color for me. But the camera would not seem to agree. It's a bit green. But I'm going to show you a little trick for that here. And it's good to make something look like you're not wearing super heavy makeup. There's a good kind of trick to that. So I'm taking my bruise wheel and I'm going to take the red. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make my skin look blotchy. So I got a little small brush and I'm going to kind of dab it around. This is something that happens when you get a wound. Your skin gets irritated everywhere, and all this blood rushes to that area, and so you get these bright kind of flushed look. And then scars tend to have discoloration that's like red and brown too, so I've got some there. And it's just going to help blend it in with my skin. The other thing I've got going against me right now is I have not put foundation on the rest of my face. And when I finish painting all these, I'll do that. You can kind of see that that helps it blend in as well. This is just to kind of lay the color down. This isn't how I'm going to leave it. I'm going to blend this back in with foundation here in a minute. And I did use a sponge for this. I think I used a sponge and a brush. And you can see now instead of being a solid color, there's some natural coloration going on now in the burn. And this is just to give the skin tone a little bit more of a natural color. And I decided that this cut caused me to have a little bit of bruising in my eye, so I added that in. I'm just doing the same thing here, just blending that out. You can see on the forehead scars that red really helped a lot because I have a lot of red going on my forehead right now. Okay, now I'm going to take the brown, which is kind of a purpley color, and I'm going to paint the inside edges of my cut. Not the whole thing, not the whole inside of the cut, just the very edges. This kind of is like painting a shadow in. That's also sort of the color of coagulated blood, which is a product you can buy. There's a product called coagulated blood, or thick blood, fresh scab. It goes by different names, but it's a really thick stage blood that looks like blood that's gummed up on a surface. Or if stage blood was grape jelly, it's got that kind of texture. In a pinch, you can actually just smear it on your face and call it a wound. All right, now I'm going to take the yellow, and remember those little raised bits of tissue? I'm going to paint those yellow like they're a bit of fat. And now my cut looks like it's gaping wound. And not just bloody, but like the actual insides of my body are showing a little bit. So that's kind of cool. And then between the purple and that yellow, I want to put some red in because it would be bleeding. And this is just the underpainting. We're going to add blood to it, but right now I just want to get the underpainting in. So when I do add blood, it's got some depth to it. I tend to put an irritation ring around most of my wounds. One thing it does is helps hide the edge where the latex meets the skin. Just sort of draws your eye away from that. But it's also something that happens when you get a cut. You get all that blood rushing to that area and it gets irritated. I'm not trying to make this here look like I have gangrene or anything. I just want it to look like a really gnarly cut. We are going to do a little bit of gangrene at the end of this. That's something you might want to consider for your zombie look, which is our third trauma project. So there's my cut. I'm happy with that. And now with the burn, what I like to do with the burn, and it depends on how healed the scar is, I just use that red and a little bit of the brown color, the browny purple color, to just kind of trace out the bits of tissue. And that's what I'm doing here. And so it can be pretty red or it can be a little more foundation-y colored. And you can kind of go back and forth with the foundation. But don't just smear it on. Make sure you're putting it on with intent. Trace your little bits of paper. The outside of them. Let the little bit of paper be a natural highlight. The scars, all you really need to do with scars is add some coloration. So that's the keloid scar. Keloid scars tend to be a bit reddish and brown. Forehead wasn't the best place to demo these. Foreheads aren't going to get anything like a keloid scar. Usually they happen on a more fleshy part of the body. So it looks a little weird on the forehead. But it's just a demo. So they tend to be like purpley brown colored. Extra blood vessels all stuck up in there. That's what causes it. I don't really know what causes it. I'm not a doctor. And if it gets too dark like that, you just work some foundation back into it. And we'll believe it. There we go, it's too dark. There's my foundation, blot that back on it. And there's my scar. There's my raised scar. And now we just have to paint my attempt at an atrophic scar. Like I said, I'm going to show you one that you can do on a piece of plastic and then apply that I think is a little bit more believable. I want a kind of brown color that I just don't have. Everything is either too red or too green. So I'm mixing the brown, the red, and the green on my hand to get a little brown color that I like for a scar. So I was just mixing that there to get that, and I'm going to apply that around the scar in its little irritation ring. And down the middle. Ideally, I would have a smoother blend around that scar. It does look like a scar, it's not the type of scar I was going for. I'm going to go ahead and put foundation everywhere to try to blend all this stuff into my face better. Foundation is wonderful at being a general canvas, so that at smoothing the canvas so that other things blend into it. Prosthetics blending into your skin is always the trick. So anything you can do to make that better is good. Latex is actually probably the hardest thing to blend into your skin. It's just the most readily available and the most common in FX kits. So there's my burn, there's my cut, there's my scars, and we are happy with that. Now we need blood. So I'm using the Kryolan blood because I have a lot of it. Your blood is a bit thicker, which I actually prefer. And you can, yours is probably in a tube, and if it's in a tube, just kind of squeeze some out and use a brush, because otherwise it's sort of like trying to apply blood with a hammer. It's hard to get it where you want it. So I want it to kind of pool up inside the cut, so I'm painting it inside the cut. And I'm painting it around those raised fatty areas so that that yellow highlight stays there. And then I'm gonna have it drip out the bottom of the cut a little bit. And I just kind of paint it in there a couple times till I get enough blood that it starts to drip. Or you can paint the drip and let it go yourself. Waiting for it to drip. Not gonna drip. All right. I'm also here painting a little bit of blood around the outside of the wound and kind of blotting that off. Some people like to do this. It ends up looking extra irritated. It also ends up looking a little bit like you had blood that's been wiped away from your wound, which is something that's pretty common when you have a wound that's bleeding profusely. You end up with a lot of blood around it. Now we're going to take that blood out. So I'm just using a tissue to blot that blood. We're going to make this wound go necrotic. So that's for zombie land. Not worried about getting it all off. All right, so I'm going to pick up my darkest color in my bruise ring, that purpley black, bluey color. And on your skin, it's going to read close enough to black. Don't use black. Use this purpley blue color. And I'm going to ring out that cut instead of that brown color and that black color. And that is not the color your skin's supposed to be. Clean off my brush. And now I'm going to pick up green. Instead of ringing in my cut in red, I'm going to ring my cut in green. And I'm going to ring it in green, and then I'm probably going to use a bit of black, that purpley black, and not black, don't use black, to give it a little bit of shadow and maybe a little bit of like veins coming out of it. Not a good situation to be in. And again, keep the edges of the cut a highlight. One, they don't tend to have a lot of color because they don't have any blood going to them. And two, it just really makes your cut pop. So there's my green and my black, purpley black. And I'm looking pretty not good. And I'm going to bruise around that area a little bit as well. There's my little blood poisoning coming off. Come on, feel the necrosis. I'm using that purpley black color now just to be clear. Not everywhere, dabby, very dabby. The necrosis is in my eye, and I add some bruising out here. One, to cover the red from the blood, and two, because I think it looks good. And this is the end of latex cuts and scars on your face. The next tutorial will cover them on your plastic, and I'll talk to you then. Bye.